Paige is one of the worst designed heroes in Deadlock, and I can prove it. I'm not saying this because she's currently overtuned, else I'd be making a video about Billy, Infernus, or Abrams. No, it has nothing to do with her damage output or relative strength. Most of the time, tune downs are all that are needed to keep heroes like those in check. Not that they're getting the tune downs, but none of those three I just mentioned would be considered that broken anymore if they got a tune down enough times. For an example, Paradox is a hero that is generally really strong no matter how little damage she can output, no matter how long her cooldowns get, and no matter how many times her items get nerfed, because Carbine and Swap are so intrinsically strong that the amount of actual damage they do doesn't matter. This is because Paradox is strong relative to her allies, since she can initiate a pick with Swap, where she swaps an enemy into her team and they get instantly evaporated. Of course, I could be short-sighted in saying this about Paradox because I thought Lash was the same way, and then they introduced Counterspell. Just to be clear, I don't think Paradox is poorly designed either. She's just an example of a hero who can't really be nerfed by tune-downs. Despite all of what I just said, Paige also isn't a poorly designed hero for the same reason that Paradox will also be meta. To explain what I mean, we have to examine why Paige was created in the first place. Now, it's my belief that most changes in Deadlock are made to make the MOBA genre more accessible to new players, since games like League and Dota are impossible to get into now with massive hero rosters and, in Dota's case, way too many items to learn. I don't think this is like a hot take, considering it seems to be the reason why barriers were reworked, though I'll always miss old barriers, and it also seems to be the reason why last hits were removed. There are also a handful of heroes that seem to be designed to help introduce players to the game. Abrams, Infernus, Seven, and Dynamo come to mind, and yes, Paige is also on that list. This isn't necessarily a foreign concept. Rivals has Cloak and Dagger, Overwatch has Mercy, and Paladins does not matter. It's not even that I'm against the idea of having a low-skill floor support hero for people to pick up easily. I mean, currently the fact that Paige is a low-skill ceiling hero is pissing me off because of how meta she is. I really don't think a hero who's so easy to play should be as strong as she is. Because then, what's the point of learning a hero like Doorman or Viscus if Paige can be just as strong? But I digress. Those are the issues that I have with Paige that can be handled with tune downs, and it's not my problem that is inherent to the hero. No, the problem with Paige is that she doesn't encourage a new player to think critically. There's no reason to, since you can just press 2 on your carry and win the game. She hardly even needs to look at the enemy team to win. Conversely, Dynamo is forced to interact with the entire lobby because about half of his value is in his ultimate ability. In fact, Dynamo's entire kit facilitates being in the front line and engaging with the enemy team, since Stomp is so powerful and really needs a massive nerf, and because Quantum Entanglement can be used to save his carries, who will also be on the front lines from big CCs or annoying ultimates. Dynamo truly is Paige's antithesis, considering he does have a low skill floor but a massive skill ceiling. QE and Singularity are two incredibly clutch abilities that also teach your average new player how they should be interacting with the game, considering the fact that they, in theory, emphasize teamwork. Of course, currently, Stomp does too much damage, but let's say he gets a tune down to his Stomp and it no longer is so ridiculous. Now, Stomp is used to displace enemies and slow down his enemies rather than pure damage, using the knock-up to set up for his carries. And obviously, if Dynamo doesn't use his Singularity wisely, he isn't going to get any value out of it, since he can get a 5-man Singularity, but if his team isn't ready for it, it really doesn't do anything. Therefore, if you're playing Dynamo, whenever you lose a team fight or fail to secure a kill, it's much more obvious what the problem is. It's bad teamwork, which is generally the reason why supports lose their team fights, if they are the problem. Paige, on the other hand, doesn't need to interact with the enemy team at all. I mean, yes, Sword and Ult are CC abilities, but she can cast both from very far away, far behind her team's front line. Outside of the CC abilities, all she has to do is press 2 on her Haze, Infernus, Billy, etc., and generally her team will be at an advantage. However, unlike Singularity, Rallying Charge doesn't necessarily have to confirm kills, and Sword is just easy to dodge and debuff remover exists. Therefore, her job in a teamfight most often is just to press 2 and Divine Barrier on anyone who needs it. The reason why this is so problematic has to do with Paige's intrinsic weaknesses. For example, going back to Dynamo, his weaknesses are that he's a massive target and that he has to push up in the front with his carries to be effective. This means he is weak to someone like Haze or Infernus, who do a lot of damage if they get to hold M1 on you for a long time, since he's such a large target. He also suffers from being the center of attention at many times, since he can clutch so many fights. Dynamo, of course, makes up for this by counterbuying. He buys Juggernaut to deal with Haze, Debuff Remover to deal with Fern. If his stomps and black holes are too obvious, he buys Warpstone and Phantom Strike so he can be more unpredictable. If he's getting CC'd while ulting, he buys Unstoppable. The flowchart goes on and on. Similarly, Paige does have a weakness. It's her lack of mobility and how squishy she is. It encourages her to stay behind and press her buttons, which is what she does. And I don't hate this idea on paper. I mean, lots of games have supports like this. But the reason why this is such a problem for Deadlock is how bad new players are at the game. What I mean is, Paige isn't pressured to counterbuy like Dynamo is, since her core game plan isn't disrupted by the enemies she's most often interacting with. At low elo. That's the caveat there. Obviously, in higher elo, she will be pressured by such enemies, but at low elo, she isn't pressured like this. As the average Paige player climbs the ranks, she'll start running into Lashes, Pockets, and Calicos, whose game plan is to jump in and quickly evaporate her to turn the fight into a 5v6, which is Paige's intrinsic weakness, the fact that she can get picked off so easily. It's not like there aren't low elo Lash and Pocket players, it's just the fact that low elo players are bound to look in the middle of a team fight, rather than the Paige behind it. By existing, Paige makes the enemy team's win condition in every teamfight to kill her first, because doing so can be quick and efficient, but low elo players won't obviously know that. Therefore, a new player that OTP's Paige will be boosted by this fact until Archon, where people actually start looking at her and picking her off. But the average player at this rank have massive egos, especially a Paige OTP who's coming off a win streak by playing a hero that fundamentally wins games easily until that rank because she's not getting that skill check. By then, I don't think the hero's kit encourages the player, who might now have a couple hundred hours under their belt, to understand why they're losing fights by getting picked off early. No, what I think is much more plausible is that these players will instead blame their team, since they have such a high win rate on Paige, they surely can't be the problem, they'll tell themselves as they get hard stuck in Archon. No, instead we're going to experience the exact same thing that Rivals did with support players. Their deaths are somehow never their fault and are always their team's fault, because they made it to gold and with a high win rate. If I die, it's not because I have bad positioning or game sense, it's because my team didn't peel for me. Paige players are basically going to be the Deadlock version of your average Cloak and Dagger main. Just replace bad positioning with bad itemization and it's a one-for-one argument. I don't hate Paige players for not understanding this. I hate the hero for not encouraging players to understand this. Therefore, no amount of buffs or nerfs will ever reconcile this problem. This hero either needs to be completely reworked or nerfed into the ground, only allowing her barrier playstyle to exist in lieu of her CC abilities, not in tandem. I have been Fighter Jet, and you've just listened to me yap for like 10 minutes. Are you okay?